Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, welcome to the new class, which is SPR 101, Spirituality 101, which is going to be about purification of the heart or purification of the soul. Before we begin, a few things about the class, which everyone should know. And those people who didn't make it, they can watch the recording, inshallah. First of all, before we begin, make an intention or renew your intention about why you're here, about why you're actually taking this class in the first place. People take classes for different reasons. Some people take it for the certificate. Some people take it because their friend is taking it. Some people take it because their parents sent them or their children sent them or one of these things. So make sure you renew your intention, and first and foremost, you do this, make sure you're doing this for the sake of Allah, because it can be an act of worship for you. And you'll be rewarded just for attending the class, even if you don't actually do any tests or anything, which you should, but you'll still be rewarded for that. So make sure your intention is there. If you did not really make a firm intention, make one now. And if you made a different intention, you can always change your intention. You can always do it for a different reason, even though you're already here. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how many of you are former students of CIS who took a class already? CIS class. Okay, so most of you kind of understand what's going on. Little bit about Canvas. How many of you are not former students, by the way? How many of you are new students to CIS? Okay, so basically we have a virtual learning environment online called Canvas by a company called Instructure. You should have already, if you're enrolled in this class and you've paid for the class, you already should have received an email telling you to sign up for this Canvas program. So what you should do, and even if you're students, listen to this because this is important. So how does Canvas work, or how are the classes going to work? Basically, you're going to come to the lectures, you're going to listen to the lectures, and then afterwards you have 1 week to complete the test, to complete the exam that's due before you walk into class the next day. So this class starts at 10:40 a.m. So when is the exam for this class that we're attending right now going to be due? At what time? Next? Saturday? Sunday? At what time? 12 p.m.? No, but that wouldn't make sense, because if you're in the class at 10:40, then there would be a problem. Right. So it's due at what time? 10:39 a.m. All right, so 1 minute before the class. Now, should you wait that long? No. But that's when it's due. That's the way all the classes are. So it's due 1 minute before the next class begins. That's the way all the tests are going to be. Make sure that when you go into Canvas and you sign up, even for those students who have already signed up, edit your profile under Canvas. Write at minimum, write your full name, so that we know you're not just an email address. We know who you actually are on the attendance sheet, so we can kind of see what's going on. So write your full name. If you want to put up, upload a little picture, you can upload a little picture. Those little, what are they called? What are those things called? Huh? No. There's an avatar. Thank you. All right, it's an avatar. You can upload your little avatar if you want. Make sure it's kosher, Sheikh Muhammad says. Make sure it's clean and everything. And put some other information in there so you can actually interact with students, and students can interact with you as well. So we want to make this a little bit more interactive online with students. There's discussion forums. There's collaborations. So use those things. There were quite a few discussions that were posted last quarter, but very few people followed up on them. How many of you actually saw the discussions going on? Okay. How many of you contributed to one discussion within the group? Okay, very few people contributed. So contribute a little bit to the discussions as well. They're there. The discussions forums are there. Study advice for you. First of all, specify the hours every week that you plan on studying and stick to them. Make a schedule for yourself, unless you're very, very good. Unless you had no issue with studying at all, and timing has never been a problem for you, then you're fine. Right? In the last 2 years, you've never had a problem studying or being on time or anything like that, great. If you have a problem, right, which most people, a lot of people encounter, make some hours for yourself, dedicate them, and set them and say, this is my study time. So anyone calls you, phone is off during that time. It's like you're in class, right? Your phone is on vibrate, Somebody else says, hey, let's go for dinner. I want to go to that restaurant. Say, I have class at that time. Make it as if you actually have class at that time. That's the only way you're going to be able to study and stick to that schedule. Set up accountability with a friend of yours. So maybe pair up with a friend of yours and say, both of us are going to be studying, not together, but we're going to be studying at the same time, and we double check our accountability. Number 2, spread the study hours throughout the week. So if you're taking more than one class, especially for those of you who are taking 3 classes, don't just try to dedicate only one day. Because if something comes up that day, then your entire schedule is messed up. Number 3, the ideal way to study for a CIS class. You read the class notes before you come to class. You read the book that you're supposed to, the section of the book, and the notes, and the PowerPoint presentation before you come to class. Then you listen to the lectures in class while taking notes. Then afterwards, you ask the questions that you have because you've already read, you had some questions in your mind, you got some of the questions clarified during the lecture, and now you ask some of the questions at the end of class that you have, and then you go back the same day that you had class, make sure that same night you review your notes again. Otherwise, they're just gonna be notes on paper. So review them when you go back. Let's see, where is it? Then, before you take the exam, you review one more time. And that's the method for success. That's the method that's been outlined by scholars. Imam al-Zarnuji, he mentions this in his very, very old book, over 1,000 years old, Ta'aleem al-Muta'allim. He mentions this as well. These are the same studying techniques that have been used by scholars throughout history. So use these if you really want to be a successful student. Number, 4, whatever. Knowing what to expect on a test is going to reduce any type of test anxiety that you may have or something like that. So we tell you what is going to be on, or what are the resources for the test. Some people emailed me and they said, you know what, can you give us a final exam guide to study from for the test? And my answer was, yes, absolutely. And that is the book. The last quarter, the book was the study guide exactly. This quarter, it's different. This quarter is not the same as last time because we were not able to write the books from scratch. So there's going to be a book for sale, especially for this class and the other class. There's a book for sale, and then there's teacher's notes. Now, teacher's notes are being uploaded right now. I think they've already been uploaded. So you can download them every week. Now, the test is going to be based upon the stuff that's in the teacher's notes. Some of the things in the book are going to be in the teacher's notes. But there's going to be many things in the teacher's notes that are not in the book. So if you want to know exactly what's on the test, it's going to be from the teacher's notes, not from the book necessarily. The book for this class is more of a supplementary nature. The book, it's a pretty decent book, but it's not the ideal book that I wanted to actually get. The ideal book that I wanted to get, unfortunately, is not available in America. And it would take about a month to ship it from another country. And there's just a low supply in America, and it's bigger and it's much more expensive. So if you have access to it, if you want to buy it, you can get it. You'll see it in the syllabus. It's called Purification of the Soul, Selected Writings on Purification of the Soul by Sa'id Hawa, which is an adaptation of Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin, which I think is one of the best books on the subject. Although it's nice to have commentary on it to avoid some issues that are there with the book. So know what's on the test. That's going to help you, inshallah. Of course, you don't only attend the class for the test. Don't start studying the night before. I strongly encourage you not to study the night before on a test or on the final exam or any of these things, because you're not going to retain the material after the test is over. So even if you do good on the test, you're not going to retain the material later on, 1 or 2 weeks down the line, which means that you came to learn and you did good on the test, but you actually didn't learn because you lost it. So the goal is not to just learn. The goal is not to just pass the test. The goal is to learn. How many of you have ever experienced this in your life? That you crammed for something and then, you know what, you did pretty good on the test, but then you lost the information at like a week later or a day later. How many of you have experienced it? And the Prophet ﷺ said, a believer is not stung from the same hole twice. You got stung once, you don't get stung again from the same hole. Hints for the multiple choice. Now, those of you who are familiar or not familiar, we have a lot of multiple choice questions. So some hints for the multiple choice. Some people are having maybe some difficulty trying to figure out how we answer and all of that. The first thing you do is try to eliminate all the wrong answers. First thing, you go through all 5 options and read the question carefully, eliminate all the wrong answers. And usually you can narrow it down to about 2 or 3. And then you start thinking about those and start focusing on those, and then try to go with your intuition. These are all from test guides. I'm taking this from those AP and SAT test guides and all of that, and it really helps and it works. So go with your intuition, and do not go back and change your answer based upon what you see, unless you remember something that you didn't remember. So people say it's a little bit tricky or something like that. Go with what seems to work best. Don't second guess yourself too much, otherwise you just confuse yourself. Okay? Make sure to review your answers before you actually submit. Okay? Hints for the short essay questions. Use complete sentences. Very, very important. Use complete sentences. Check your grammar before you submit. Right? Go back and do it again. One of the good things you can do is type in a word processor, Microsoft Word, or what's the free one called? OpenOffice or something like that. You can download it for free. Type in there. You can check your word count. You can also check your spelling, and then copy and paste it into your browser. Okay, into the Canvas thing. So that makes life easier for you. Before you start writing your essay, map out your ideas. Write some point. Don't just start writing. Right? Map out your ideas and think. Okay, what is this question asking me? Okay, these are all the parts that it's asking me. Map out your answer in a few points. Once you have that structure there, then you start writing. That's going to be the best way for you to write those essays. And inshallah, maybe we'll have some workshops to help you in that regard. Write to the point. Don't start writing about, I had a friend and this happened to them, or, Islam is so cool because of this and this and this, and then you just go around the question. Don't do that. Write straight to the point. Answer the question in the time that you can actually answer, in the amount that it needs to be answered in. And do not plagiarize or get help from somebody else. You can get help in terms of sentence structure or grammar or something like that. Some people, you may ask your children or whatever it is, but do not try and copy off somebody else. Okay, scores. Okay, so some things, I'm clarifying some things that people have had a lot of questions too. Scores in terms of passing CIS, passing every class, you have to have at least 70% in the module. So 70% is a pass. Anything below 70% is not going to be a pass. And that's going to be in our student guidebook, right? It's there, right? Yeah, it's there. So it's there in our student guidebook. The reason why it's 70%, and in like public school or wherever else, it's what? It's 60%, right? Because it's a representation of Islam, because you're representing Islam. So this could we want to make sure that it's there. What does it mean? What do the scores actually mean? What does 90% mean? What does 80% mean? All of these things. It's not about how much you necessarily know. So don't get depressed about your scores. It's not about how much you know. It's not about how good of a Muslim you are or anything like that. This scale was nice, so I decided to adopt it from the AP College Board. They say that if you have our adaptation is, if you have 90%, it generally means that you're extremely well qualified in this subject, in the way that we've taught it. If you have 90%. If you have 80% or above, it means you're well qualified. Well qualified that you understand it, you're probably qualified to teach it as well, at least to a small group of people. If you have 70% or above, you're qualified. If you have 60%, you might be qualified, possibly, but we can't, we're not sure. We can't tell. And if you're below that, then it basically means no recommendation. It's not that you failed or something like that. It means that we can't tell if you really grasped all of the material, if you understood all of it, if you have a correct understanding of it or not. So that's why tests are not going to guarantee that you understand something. It's not going to guarantee that you're able to practice it. It's not going to guarantee that you're able to teach it correctly either. But they're there to kind of help gauge who knows what, and for yourself, most importantly, whether you know or you don't know. So we're trying to maintain those standards. Question policy for the classes is write down your questions. When you think of something, write down the questions. Everyone who's had a question and then they didn't write it down, there's at least been a time in your life where you forgot the question, right? How many of it's ever happened to you? You had a question, you didn't write it down, you forgot the question. So don't get bit from the same hole twice. It's probably an important thing, so write it down and you can ask later. We're going to have questions at the end of class time because of the time constraints that we've had with the classes. There's a lot of content to cover, so we're going to take questions at the end, which means you should write them all down before you, so that you remember them. Make sure that the questions are relevant to the course. So please ask questions that are relevant to, not just the course, that are relevant to what we've actually covered today. That's very, very important. If you have, let's see what else. Do not be embarrassed to ask a question. Okay, no question is foolish or something like that, because most likely somebody else had the same question and they got shy and they didn't ask, and you're hoping that someone else would ask the question for you. Don't be shy, just ask the question. You cannot learn. There are two types of people. The scholars say there's two types of people who can never learn. Those people who are arrogant and those people who are shy. The people who are arrogant because they don't want to learn. And the people who are shy because they're not going to ask the question. Send questions on Canvas as you read the material before or after class. So if you have any questions that is related to the class in terms of the material, you send me a message directly through Canvas, through the inbox, a messaging system that's there. Any questions about grading, any questions about deadlines, any questions about adding or dropping, about timeline, about regrading, or why did this question get asked this way? I'm not the person to take that question, so please don't send it to me. I'm just going to send you a message that says, please send this to the TA. How many of you got one of those from me? I sent at least 100 of them, right, last quarter, at least. Right? So Abdul Sami', alhamdulillah, he's the TA, he's the lead TA, and he's going to be taking those questions. So please send it to him. I'm just going to send you a simple sentence that says, please send this to the TA. And then you have to go and send it to the TA. And please do not CC me either. So please don't send it to both of us. Okay? There's one of you, there's more than one that actually did that. So just send it to him or send it to me. Don't send it to both of us, because Canvas system has a bit of a problem displaying on who you've sent it to. So we can't exactly always see who's been CC'd and who's responding and all of that. It's not like email. So it's still it's software that needs some work, inshallah. What else? Okay, if there's any questions that are not related to the class, then don't send me a message in Canvas, send me an email. My email address is there on the syllabus that you can download for the class. If you want to come and discuss a point, or you want to argue a specific point, the best place for that is not the class. The best place is my office hours. So make an appointment with me, and we can sit there and we can debate it, or we can discuss it, or we can talk about some things. My office hours are there as well. In terms of test-out policy, we'll talk about this in the next class more. Test-out policy of classes are only going to be for 3 classes in particular. That is for Quranic recitation, tajweed. Next year's class, Arabic 1 and Arabic 2. So these are the only 3 classes that you can actually test out of, and I'll explain in those classes how to test out, inshallah. Are there any questions about any of these things that I've just discussed right now? No, test out means you skip the class and you take the final exam directly. Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's begin, inshallah ta'ala, with purification of the heart. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We begin by praising Allah and by sending peace and blessings upon the last and final messenger, Muhammad. We begin with the dua. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana. O Allah, teach us that which will benefit us, and allow us to benefit from that which you've already taught us. So the reality of the situation is that there is no benefit in learning things which are not going to benefit you in some way. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us learn those things which are actually beneficial to us, and once we've learned them, we ask Allah to allow us to actually benefit from them. Because just knowing them doesn't mean that you're going to benefit from them. So the class we're going to be covering is Spirituality 101. This class, as just an introduction here, this class is going to be different from the other classes. So the class is different because the content is different. And because the content is different, the style of teaching is going to be different. So I'm going to be teaching in a very, very different way. So if you don't find some jokes or some humor in this class where you'll find in other classes, if you don't see that it's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit tougher on you, you feel that you're being criticized a little bit, you feel that you're being tough, you're getting hit pretty hard, that's because this type of class demands it. There's no benefit in this class if you don't feel that, if you're not getting that. So just be prepared for that and understand that this type of subject demands it. Otherwise, we can talk about purification of the heart and theory and the definition of purification and the linguistic definition and go around and tipsy-toe all around, and we're not going to benefit at all. So just understand that from the get-go, and understand that, of course, out of all the subjects to teach, this is the one where no one can be really qualified to teach. And definitely, I'm not one of those people. But inshallah, there can be some benefit to reminding myself and reminding everybody else. So just be ready for that, inshallah. So the importance of the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, referring to the heart or the soul, says, the one who purifies it will have success, and the one who corrupts it will fail. Meaning, this is referring to the nafs, what I've translated as soul. The one who purifies it will have success. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that there's a part in the body, and if it gets purified, you will have success. And if you corrupt it, you will fail. Ultimate definition. Verse number 2. Those who are protected from the greed of their own ego will be successful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in a verse. It's a shuhha nafsi, meaning that whoever is protected from shuh means like the stinginess or the miserliness of their nafs, of their soul, of their ego, those people will be successful. So far we've seen the term nafs being used twice. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another verse, on that day, which day? The day of judgment. On that day, no amount of wealth or children will be of any benefit except the one who comes to Allah with a sound heart. Qalbin salim. So meaning that Allah is defining that success lies in this entity that we're talking about as the qalb or the nafs or the heart, which we're gonna talk about. Okay, so this is just an introductory about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. Now understand that every single person, every single human being has a body and a soul. They have not just a physical body, they also have something beyond that, a spiritual heart or a soul. Now, the latter term, the soul or the heart, it refers to something spiritual, something metaphysical, meaning something beyond the physical that you cannot perceive. You cannot see it, you cannot understand its details, but you can know that it exists. Now, in Islamic terminology, this is referred to as the nafs or the qalb. Nafs, I'm translating as soul. Sometimes it's translated as self. Sometimes it's translated as ego, depending on how it's being used. And then there's the word qalb, which is the word heart. Okay, the word heart is another word that's being used. Now, remember, the term heart is not referring to the physical heart. In fact, there's very little connection. There's no direct connection with the heart that's mentioned. When we say heart, we're referring to the thing which is the spiritual heart, which is something above and beyond what you can perceive. It's not the organ that's pumping blood. It's not related to that necessarily. The book mentions that there are many metaphors used universally in most cultures that refer to the heart. People talk about being cold-hearted and hard-hearted, having a diseased heart and all of these things. So it's pretty much universally acknowledged that the heart is a very good metaphor for this soul or this metaphysical, spiritual thing which we're talking about, which is actually in control of the entire body. So whether we use the term soul or whether we use the term heart, it doesn't make any difference. We know that we're referring to the exact same thing. Now the heart is actually in control of the entire body. Now that's something that we have to understand, because we're taught today that the brain is actually in control of everything. So that's because when people look at it from a purely materialistic perspective, the only thing that they can perceive and the only thing that they can see is what is observable. So for them, it looks like the nervous system, the brain, and the firing of the signals in the brain is actually resulting in control of the entire body. Your limb moves because there's some kind of firing in the brain for the most part, unless it's a reflex. It doesn't have to go through the brain. But what Islam is saying is that there's something that's in control of the body above and beyond that. There's something that's in control of the brain. It's not just some neurons that are firing. There's something that makes you to choose a decision that you're choosing. And that's known as the qalb or known as the nafs, that you're selecting. And the terms differ. People have different terms. Example for that, or evidence for that. If you were going to make a laceration, a cut in part of the brain, people say that, well, if you sever part of the brain, or you take out one lobe, the frontal lobe, or whatever, cortex, or whatever it may be, then you lose some function. And therefore, that's going to be a proof that the brain is actually in control of everything. But that's like saying that, you know what, if you sever somebody's hand off, if you cut their hand off, and you say, look, the brain is not in control of it anymore because now it's been cut off. No, the reality of the situation is that was an outside interference that someone did. If somebody comes and messes with your brain, that's an outside interference. It doesn't mean that it's something that you have chosen. If there's a problem, if you stimulate some part of the brain, some parts of the body can move. The same part, if you stimulate other parts of the body, they can also move as well. But that's someone manipulating your physical aspects. It doesn't mean that you're choosing it. The choosing part, or the free will, or the selection that human beings have, that specific thing is being done by the heart, or being done by the soul. So that's something that you have to understand, that your heart is in control of your entire body in terms of what you do, what you choose, what you like, what you dislike, what abilities you have, all of these things. Of course, it's limited, but you have a selection. That free will is being manifested through your heart. And that's very, very important for you to understand from the beginning. Now, every single part of the body has a function. Every part of the body has a specific function. And if there's any organ in the body, any part of the body happens to be diseased, what ends up happening is that it's not able to function in the way that it should be functioning. Like the eye, for example. The eye is supposed to be able to see. Now, if there's no light, then the eye cannot see. And if there's light that's present, but the eye is diseased, then the eye is not going to be able to either see properly, or it's not going to be able to see at all. So the same way the heart is susceptible, and when we say heart, again, we're talking about the thing that's in control, the soul. The heart is susceptible to disease as well. And if it becomes diseased, then it cannot fulfill its essential purpose. So what is its purpose? What is the function of the heart? If the function of the eye is mainly to see, the function of the hand is mainly to, move and grab things and do other things, what is the function of the heart essentially? Who knows? What was it created for? To feel, to judge from right and wrong. That's part of it. Definitely part of it. Okay? Yes. Okay, we said we're not talking about the physical heart. We're talking about the spiritual heart. To purify the body from what? Yes. We're going to get to the hadith, but what do you mean purify the body? So the goal of the heart is to purify the body. Okay, that's not the goal though. That's not its function actually. That's something that needs to be done, but it's not its essential function. Its essential function is okay, it gives you desire. The desires are involved there. Its essential function, the reason why it was created, is to know Allah and to follow the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent. All the other things are supplementary. So it has the desires in it. It has dislikes and dislikes. It leans towards this way, it leans towards that way. But the essential reason for it being there in the first place is that it's there to recognize Allah. That's why Allah created it in the first place. That's why other creations do not have the heart. We're not talking about the physical heart. They don't have that heart. They don't have that soul. They don't have that, that will to choose and make decisions. Other animals don't have that. That's why they're not going to be judged. But human beings have that. So the essential purpose behind the heart was to know Allah and to follow the guidance. To follow the guidance when it comes from Allah. So this ability to know, to understand, and to choose, most importantly, is what differentiates us between other animals. And Imam Ghazali gives a very good explanation. He says, if you think that you as a human being are superior to animals for any other reason besides this, then think again. How many animals are stronger than you? How many animals have a greater hunger than you? How many animals are faster than you? How many animals have abilities which you don't have, which are much better than you? There are animals which can transmit sonar. There are animals which can see in the dark. There are animals which can glow in the dark. There are animals which can, see certain light spectrums that you cannot even see. So if you think that you're better than these animals because of some of these things, you miss the point. The only thing that differentiates us or makes us superior to the other creation or the other animals is what? It's the fact that we have this heart, we have this ability to choose, we have this ability to learn in order to make these choices. So, so anything which prevents the heart from fulfilling its purpose is known as a disease. It's known as a disease of the heart. And that's something that is important to understand. Okay. Now, purifying the heart is, where's the hadith? The Prophet ﷺ said that there is a certain entity in the body. There's a certain entity in your body. If it is sound, meaning if it is clean, it is healthy, it is sound, then the entire body will be sound. And if it becomes corrupt, the entire body will become corrupt. He said, indeed, it is the heart. This is exactly how the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, explained it. So what does this tell us? It tells us something very important, that it is an individual obligation on every single Muslim, right, who is sane and mature and fulfills the criteria, that they must make sure their heart is sound. That's an obligation on every person. This is not something that's just, it's nice to have. Like something, somebody says we're just going to learn, to recite the Quran in a beautiful way, or we're going to learn, public speaking skills or debating skills. That's all nice. But this is an obligation. This is a mandatory requirement on everyone, according to most scholars. Now, if you think about this hadith, this statement, this prophetic statement, and you think about every act of injustice in the world that has ever been manifested, it's been the result of a diseased heart. There have been people who've manifested their arrogance and killed others. There are people who manifested their anger and done something wrong to someone else, or said something against somebody else. There have been people who are envious. They have the disease of envy. They've manifested that. Almost all the problems in the world that we see today are the result of diseased hearts. So what does that mean? That means if we want to rectify the problems in society, we have two options. Option one is to either help purify the hearts of these people. Option number two, which is not mentioned in the book mentions this. Option number two is to stop these people who have diseased hearts from manifesting their diseases onto other people. These are the two things. It's not just about one. If you can't do it and they're not going to change, then you stop it. But now that I've mentioned that part, what we should do in this class is every single time we're talking about a disease, we're talking about an illness, we're describing it, make sure that you're only looking in the mirror at yourself. Because what's going to happen is, if the moment you start thinking that yes, that dictator or that person or that person in my family, they have this problem or they have this issue. I know someone who fits exactly that criteria. The moment you start doing that, you're not going to be able to help yourself anymore. Even if it's true, you're not going to be able to help yourself. So for this class, make sure you're focusing just on yourself. Imagine there's a mirror right in front of you and you're listening to these things and you see, does it apply to me? Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to benefit. So, there have been many specialists, like scholars like Imam al-Ghazali, I think, who's one of the really amazing scholars, who's explained these diseases and these illnesses in detail. Explained them in great detail. And our responsibility is to learn about what he's explained, or scholars like him have explained, understand what are the symptoms of these diseases, see if we have some of these illnesses ourselves, and look at the treatments and the cures that they've, suggested for us, and see if we can apply them as well. So this is what we're going to be doing, insha'Allah ta'ala, in this class. So we should take these things very seriously and not take them lightly. Okay? So knowing how the heart works. Let me just grab some water. Knowing how the heart works. So, knowing how to purify your heart is actually a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. The end goal is what? What is the end goal? Anybody? To please. Okay, the goal in learning about purifying your heart is what? To purify your heart. To purify your heart. So the knowledge of purifying the heart is a prerequisite. It's a means. Knowing how to do it and knowing what to do is a means. Azizan, should we stop? Okay. So knowing how to do it is a means. So scholars say that, if the end is a requirement, if the end is an obligation, then the means to that end is also an obligation. Meaning that knowledge about these things is an obligation. It's obligatory. It's mandatory. Everyone should know it. Everyone needs to know it. So it's a prerequisite to attaining that end. The reality, as Imam Ghazali says, most people are ignorant about their own hearts. They don't know what is actually in their own heart. They don't understand their own traits. They don't know what they're actually thinking, and they don't reflect upon it at all. So whoever wants to purify their heart should first know how it works, how does it actually function, and they should know what weaknesses the heart is susceptible to. This is very, very important. This is similar, the example is like a cardiologist, right? If you have a heart doctor, someone who's a specialist physician, specialist in the heart, do they just start operating if you have some problem? No. They study the details of how the heart functions, of how it works, how the blood pumps and all of that. The same thing with the spiritual heart. If you understand how it functions, if you understand its weaknesses, if you understand what is it susceptible to, what are the illnesses and diseases it's susceptible to, then you're going to be able to prevent it from getting diseased, or you're going to be able to treat it in some way. So, understand that originally, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you is that He created you in a way that your heart is originally clean. It's originally clean, and it can lean towards good and it can lean towards bad equally. It has this ability to go this way or to go that way. So it's originally balanced. It's originally pure. But what ends up happening throughout life, it begins to sway to one side or the other side. It'll sway towards bad things or it'll sway towards good things. Now what causes it to go this way or that way? It's influences. The influences that you come across in life is going to determine what happens to your heart. It's like your car. You drive your car outside and there's dirt that collects. There's different places you're going to drive through, and over time, what do? You have to clean your car on a regular basis. It's going to keep on getting dirty because of the environment that it's in. So we live in a world, no matter how great of a city or bad of a city we live in a world where there are problems being manifested. So you will encounter, that's part of the test of life, you will encounter, whether you like it or you don't like it, you will encounter negative influences. And your heart will either incline towards them, or they will incline towards them sometimes, and sometimes they'll be able to resist. But you need to purify. The same way you need to clean your car on a regular basis. It's not a one-time thing. It's not something you just do and you say, okay, good, I'm done for the life. It's not like Hajj. You perform it once in your lifetime and you're done and you're finished. This is not the same thing. So, the example that Imam Ghazali gives has been adapted for modern usage by me, is that imagine your heart is like a vault, a treasure vault. Inside there's a treasure, gold, jewels, diamonds, all of these things. And you need access to that vault. But there are people outside, there are thieves, who are trying to get access to that vault as well. So there are weaknesses. The weaknesses are the entrances to get inside that vault. And there are people trying to break in. And when they're trying to break in, what are they looking for? They're looking for the spots that you've left open. They're looking for some weaknesses where they can exploit. And they could get through and they can get inside there. So imagine there's a bunch of computer hackers. There's a bunch of people with drills and all of these things. They know exactly how to crack into that vault. And your job is to make sure you secure it as much as possible so that they cannot get in. It's the same thing that those entrances, those weaknesses are your character traits. What's known as your akhlaq or your adab. The way that you manifest, the way that you behave, your behavior are those entrances. So when you don't protect your behavior, that's the way that these people can get in and they can take all the valuables that you have. That's the way that they can get in, infiltrate, and take everything that's of value to you and corrupt your heart. So your job is to do what? Your job is to make sure that you're protecting all of those weak spots by making sure that your character is in check at all times. Right? And Shaitan, Satan, is one of those people. His whispers, when he sees somebody who has those weaknesses open, he's a professional thief. Because he has millions of years of experience of going and taking and messing up people's hearts. So he knows how to get to you. And he knows how to whisper to you. So let's take an example. For example, the entrances are your character traits. Anger is an entrance, a weakness. Greed is a weakness. Desire or lust, sexual desire, is a weakness. These are all traits. These are all character traits, akhlaq, that people have that can cause them to get messed up. That can cause them to become, steal their treasure away. Meaning that ruin them. It's going to ruin them. So when they're not controlled properly, what's going to happen? Your heart will be at risk of disease. And the disease will come into your heart. Now, it's an obligation that you protect your heart from these traits in order to make sure that you keep your distance from them. So not only do you avoid these things, not only do you say, I'm not going to allow anger to control me, you don't even go near it. You don't even get close to it. Right? The same way that Adam, Prophet Adam, he was forbidden to go near the tree. Now what was the problem? He was not supposed to eat from the tree. But what did Allah tell him? Do not go near the tree. Don't even come close, because if you come close, then you're going to get more tempted. And you're more likely to fall into that type of sin. The Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessings be upon him, he used to teach his companions this. One of the stories in which he taught them was, one night he was walking outside the masjid in the city of Medina. And some of his companions saw him. And he said salam to them, and he was walking with his wife Safiya. Now the thing was very dark at night. And the guys can see the Prophet from a distance, and they know that's the Prophet, and they see a woman next to the Prophet. So what does the Prophet ﷺ tell them? He says, "O people, this is Safiya, this is my wife," basically. He's telling them, this is my wife. Now what did they say? They said, "Oh, Ya Rasulullah, Messenger of Allah, we would never think something like that of you. You don't need to tell us that it's your wife. We would never think something like that about you." And he responded and he says, these are the thoughts that crop up. Not the exact wording, but the meaning was that these are the thoughts that can come in your mind and you need to protect yourself from them. He was teaching them that make sure you don't even come near those thoughts. He didn't even want them, even some random thought. These are companions. They're not going to even think this. But you should still cut off the thought from the beginning. From the beginning, just in case. That's how important it is to protect it. to protect the heart from thinking these type of things, or going down this kind of road about suspicion, or about whatever else disease it might be. So there's evidence for that in the prophetic wisdom. The Imam Ghazali gives another good example. He says that imagine that Satan is like a hungry dog. Okay, imagine he's a hungry dog and he's coming and he's barking at you. Now normally what ends up happening is, if you just tell the dog, just get out of here, scram, just go away, most dogs will eventually leave because they're looking for something. What are they looking for? They're looking for food. He says, but if that dog comes to you and you have some food in your hand, right, and the dog wants that food, you can yell at it, you can scream at it, you can do all of those things, it's not going to go away because it wants that food. The same thing, you can say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, and you can say all of these things, and you can start reciting Quran, and you can start praying, and all of these things. It's not going to go away if you have that food of shaitan. What is that food of shaitan? Those are the diseases of the heart. Those character traits. You have a problem with anger, and you're not able to even bring your anger down. And you're saying all the statements and you're doing everything, but you're not able to bring your anger down. You have an anger problem and you can't control it. The words themselves are not going to solve the problem. Because shaitan's going to come and he's like that dog, he just wants to get the food. Because he sees that you're one of those guys who has it, he's going to go after you. So you need to be very, very careful about that. So keep the food of shaitan away, this analogy, keep the food of shaitan away, and the food of shaitan is, who raise your hand if you know, if you got the point. What is it? Character traits, bad character traits. Exactly. And then remember that if the heart is not going to be purified, if the heart is not purified, then the remembrance of Allah is only going to be verbal. It's going to remain verbal. It's not going to be benefiting you. And Imam Ghazali, again, he said, this almost all of the stuff I'm telling you is based upon Imam al-Ghazali. So I'm not going to mention him all the time. If you want to test it, he says, if you want to test it, check your prayers. Check your prayers. And see how often shaitan can whisper and make your mind wander. And he says, your mind is in the market, and your mind is in your business, and your mind is in the classroom, and your mind is, thinking about some movie, thinking about something you did at work, wherever it may be. See how your mind wanders. So he says, that's a test for you, to be able to tell where you really are, and what your real status and what your real position is. So purifying the heart of the underlying causes of these diseases can actually protect it as well from these things creeping in. Then, if you can do that and you can protect it, then shaitan can only temporarily make you slip. So you don't have a diseased heart, so when you make a mistake, you will slip temporarily, but it's not a permanent problem that you have in yourself. Doesn't mean that you're not going to commit sins anymore. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is that you're not going to be in a permanent state of having this problem anymore. So there are three types of hearts. There are three types of hearts. The first, and just judge yourself. Just judge yourself and think about yourself. Which category am I falling in? The first one is the heart that is fully conscious of Allah. Meaning the heart that has taqwa in it. And that's a heart that has been purified of all the diseases that we're going to be talking about in this class through a cleansing process, through mujahada, through effort that you've put in to remove those quality traits. And it's free from all those bad akhlaq. It doesn't have those bad quality traits and those bad character and the bad manifestations. The second heart is the heart that is full of desires and weaknesses. And it just kind of goes with the wind. Every time some desire comes, that heart has to go and give in to that desire. It cannot control itself. Every time it encounters something that it wants, it has to lean towards that. Even though something is telling it from the back, you shouldn't do that, it's not good for you. But it goes ahead and does it anyways. It's full of impurity. It's full of bad character traits. And it says, Satan and others can easily overcome whatever minimal amount of consciousness of Allah, whatever minimal amount of taqwa that it might have had. And every time it gets overcome. So this is classified as a dark heart. that has no light. It's like an eye which cannot see. It cannot perform its function. And when the heart gets at this point in time, there is no admonition affects it. So you listen to someone reminding you of death, and it's not affecting. Nothing's working. Someone is telling you that remember why you've been created, and it's not working. Someone is reciting verses of the Quran for you, explaining them to you, and it's not having any effect whatsoever. That's the sign of the worst sign of the diseased heart. It cannot be recovered anymore. Because the person is diseased it so much, they don't want to recover. If it's gone all the way that way, there's always a chance of recovery, but many of them who get to that point, they're not going to come back. And the third type of heart, and may Allah protect us from the second type of heart. The third type of heart is the confused one. It's the one that fluctuates between desires, following desires, and the one that fluctuates between following the guidance of Allah. Sometimes it has taqwa, sometimes it follows desires. And it keeps going back and forth, back and forth. And one of them, this way or that way is going to overcome it. And it's going to pull it in the opposite, pull it in one direction, and that's what it's going to become for the rest of, until the person dies. So, again, second reminder. While you're going through these things, if you find yourself thinking about another person, you say, I know someone, I know that person has a fully diseased heart. Then you have a problem. Again, I'm reminding you have a problem. You keep on going and you keep on looking at the other person. And you start going, you look at the other person. Even if you said, mashallah, that person has a pure heart. Again, you're moving the focus away from yourself and you're putting it on somebody else. And you're not going to be able to benefit from that one. Okay. So judge yourself first. Some more examples. Remember that shaitan cannot be only repelled by prayer and by the remembrance of Allah. This is a big mistake that many people make. They think that prayer or zikr or remembrance of Allah or these things is some kind of magic pill. It's like a formula and you just recite it and all of a sudden it's just going to change a person around. You pray for like 3 hours. Whether or not you have concentration, as long as you say the words, everything is just going to all of a sudden make a big change in yourself. It doesn't work that way. It has a benefit, it has an effect because you're submitting to Allah, but it does not change you in that way. And the example is that imagine you took some pain medication when you swallowed some food which was rotten. You have the rotten food in your stomach and it's sitting there, it's causing you pain. Now you're going to take a pain medication to dull the pain, right? Is that going to solve the problem? It's not going to solve the problem. Until you get that food out of there, that rotten food, until you vomit it up or you get it out or whatever, it's not going to solve the root of the problem. That's the same thing here. So we have to understand the prayer is the medicine that's supposed to work. It's supposed to bring the body back into a sound state. But if you have something inside of you that's diseased, is the illness that's there, it's not going to work, it's not going to function the way that it's supposed to. It's not that it doesn't have any benefit, it doesn't mean that you give it up, but it's not going to function the way that you would like it to function and the way that it should function. The same thing with intention. If you pray and you do all the motions, you say all the words correctly, you recite every single letter of the Quran with the perfect tajweed, it's still not going to benefit you if your intention was not there in the first place. If your intention was to show off, if your intention was something else, what is that going to benefit you? It's not going to benefit you in any way whatsoever. So this magic pill concept is a delusion that people have. It requires effort. It requires striving and struggle. So we'll conclude this section with a statement by one of the scholars by the name of Ibrahim ibn Adham. He was a well-known pious man. Some of the people came, or some of his students, or some of the people, they came and they asked him a question. And they said, what is wrong with us? What is wrong with us? We pray to Allah. We're praying to Allah, but He does not grant our du'as. He does not grant our supplications. We're asking Allah and He's not granting it. Even though Allah, and they're telling him, even though Allah said in the Quran, ask me and I will respond. We're asking Allah and He's not responding. So what's the problem? So he responded and he said, there's 8 habits that you people have that caused your hearts to die. that's causing this problem. He said, number one, you have known Allah's rights over you, but you have not fulfilled them. You knew your responsibility towards Allah, but you did not fulfill them. Number two, you've recited the Quran, but you did not follow what you were reciting. Number three, you have said that you love the Messenger of Allah, but you've neglected his way, meaning you've neglected his sunnah. Number four, you have said that you fear death, but you have not prepared anything for it. Number five, Allah says in the Quran to take Satan, to take shaitan as your enemy. And instead, you sought his help in acts of disobedience against Allah. Number, whatever it is, 6. You said that you fear the fire of hell, but you have committed so many evil deeds. Number 7. You have said that you love paradise. You love to go to Jannah, but you've not even tried to earn it. And number 8. When you wake up, you neglect your own defects and you start looking in the defects of other people. And then he said, this is how you've incurred the anger of Allah. How could your supplications be granted? So just think about that. Reflect upon that. And we'll continue inshallah. Should we take a break now? No? Okay, inshallah. Let's continue then, inshallah. The importance of character. So, something we need to understand. A person's character, when we're talking about character, we're talking about your behavior, the way that you act. A person's character produces actions without requiring much deliberation. Meaning that what is your character? Your character is what causes you to act in certain ways. That's part of your character. And usually the way that it works, it works like on autopilot. You know, when you're driving to school or you're driving to work in the morning, or you're driving back or whatever it is, you don't really think about every single turn. You're not conscious about which freeway you go onto and which place you're going. That's why some people on a Saturday or on their holiday, for example, they start driving to a destination and accidentally they'll just start driving to the work like they normally go because they're on autopilot mode. That is the same way as your character. Your character, what you really have inside your heart and your character that's there, it's going to manifest itself in certain actions and it manifests itself automatically. So your character naturally comes out. You have to fight it if you want to get something else out. So whatever you're doing, it's a result of your character, which is a result of your heart. So there are people who talk, when we talk about changing your character, there are people who, as Imam Ghazali, beautiful wording, he says there are some people who've become accustomed to laziness, and then they make this claim and they say, "This is the way I am, right? This is the way I was created." Have you heard people say this? This is just the way I am, right? This is how I am. This is the way that Allah made me, right? So some of them justify it by saying, "This is the way I've been created." Some of them justify it by saying, "This is the way I was raised. My parents or my environment caused me to become this way. So I'm rough, or I'm tough, or I'm mean, or I curse, or I do whatever, because this is the way that I was brought up." So the answer to someone who says something like this is quite simple. The answer number one is, if that was true, if it was true that you're not able to change your character, and no one's able to change their character, then there would be no point in Allah giving us all this admonition in the Quran. Every verse in the Quran which tells you to do something that you're not already doing, there would be no point in that. That would be useless. And Allah is not going to send a Quran that you're not able to achieve, that you're not able to do. There's no point in anyone giving advice to anybody about anything if you're not able to change. So that's obviously, that's false. Number two, even wild animals can be tamed. Right? There are wild animals, there are lions that can be tamed. You put them in the zoo. For the most part, they behave quite well. Right? If you train them really well. There are horses that are taught to walk in a certain way. Wild horses can be tamed to become like domesticated. They walk in a certain fashion, for armies and all of that. There are different animals, wild animals, the most ferocious of animals. They can even be tamed by a trainer. So you're saying that with your intelligence that Allah has given you as a human being, your superior intelligence over the animals, that you're worse than them, that you cannot change, yet they can change many of their characteristics, then you're worse than the animals. There's no good in you. And number 3, that it's true that some people require more effort. There's no doubt about it. Some people require more effort to change some characteristics than others. Why? Is it fair? Explain why. Some people are more rigid and stubborn. That's not fair. Why did Allah make them that way? Exactly. Everyone has different tests. So that can be their individual test from Allah. People will be, the test will be balanced out in different ways. So some people, that's going to be their test, to control their anger. Or they get, they're hot-headed. They may have to do that. Other people will have different tests that come across. Other people will be very, good-looking. So more people are going to be coming, and they're going to be more inclined towards going and committing some other type of something that's forbidden. So people have different tests. Good. So some people have to work harder at it than others. But it's either part of their test, or it's because they've been doing this for such a long time that it's become deep-rooted within themselves. So they might have actually caused that problem themselves, so that now they need to work extra hard to get out of it. It's like somebody who has bad handwriting. All right? It becomes a habit. It's not that it can't be changed. Some people require more effort to change their handwriting, make it nicer, if that's important for them. They can sit down and they can practice it, they can work at it, they can take a class on it, and it could get fixed. But some people just have different habits. They've been doing it for such a long time. So we have to understand that. The excuse should not be there, that I cannot change. Never make this excuse to yourself, and never accept this excuse from anybody else either. Now, the goal in purifying the heart is actually to attain balance in these things that we've mentioned, in these desires, and to have control over them. It's not to uproot them. The goal is not to remove these things from you. So the goal this is very different. Islam is different from religions and philosophies which teach that you have to uproot the characteristic. So if you want to solve your problem of desire, you have to remove desire from yourself completely. You should have no lust, no sexual desire. If you want to solve the problem of anger, you have to remove anger completely and just be happy all the time. This is not what Islam teaches. Islam teaches that your desires have to be balanced between hyper-manifestation of these qualities or an insufficient expression of these qualities. Right? So, for example, a person who eats too much food, it's bad for them. A person who eats too little food, it's also bad for them. The goal is moderation and the goal is balance, if you can get yourself balanced. Now, the prophets who have been sent throughout time, they're the best of creation. They had characteristics of anger. The prophets they manifested anger, but in the right time and in the right place. They manifested hunger. They manifested a desire for tasty food, but in the right quantity, in the right amount, without going this way or that way, without going to either extreme. So they had the correct balance. Now, desires are natural. Having desires or inclinations towards things are natural. It's not a problem. Allah created them for a reason. So what are the reasons? Let's take a look at some of them. Having an appetite, for example. Having an appetite exists obviously to nourish the body. If you did not have an appetite, then you don't feel like eating, it's very, very difficult to survive. It's very difficult to maintain your body because you don't feel like eating anything. Like, for example, the illness typhoid. It's a common illness in certain parts of the world. It's caused by food poisoning. I had typhoid myself when I was in India. One of the symptoms, your temperature goes to 104 degrees. For some reason, just stays there. And you have no appetite whatsoever. So you don't feel like eating. So if you don't eat anything, or you don't go to the hospital and get something injected in you, you just don't feel like eating at all. And you're going to end up dying if you don't do that. So this is a problem with that illness. Right? So not having the desire for eating is a problem. So it has to be there, and it has to be there in a balance. And that's very important. So why do we have these things? Appetite is easy to understand. We have our appetite to nourish the body, and it's a natural thing. Now let's talk about greed. Being greedy, right? Wanting things. You know the little kids, they want to go and grab everything and they want something. Why does that exist? It exists for a reason, and there's a beneficial reason that's there. The reason is to protect your belongings. If you had no desire for anything, anyone can come and take something from you, and you don't mind. Everything you get, someone just comes and steals it from you. You have no desire for anything, you're not going to be able to function in life. Desire, meaning sexual desire, lust. There's a desire that's there for the reason of procreation. Human beings would not be multiplying, they would not, survive in this world if there was no desire, or there was no motive, or there was no inclination to go and procreate. That would cause a problem. So all of these things have a specific reason, even anger. So usually we see anger and these other things, greed, as bad characteristics. The only reason why they're bad characteristics is because usually they're out of balance in most people, and they cause people to do certain things, which is why. But the reality, we're talking about a little bit about the theory here. The reality is, even having a certain amount of anger is necessary. Why? In order to defend yourself sometimes. It's an emotion that comes out in order to defend yourself, or in order to fight for justice, right? Or fight against injustice. This is important. Imagine you felt nothing when people are dying. You feel nothing. And you say, you know what, just forgive. Someone else gets killed, just forgive. And have mercy and all of that. Imagine how this world would be. In Islam, these things must be in balance. They're not there to just sit in one way or sit in the other way. That's why the other philosophies and the other theories out there that talk about having this quality or that quality and don't have the opposite quality, that's not what Islam teaches, and it's not balanced. They have to exist in a proper proportion, in a proper and just balance. So that's the way they work. Imam al-Shafi'i, he said in a poem, he said, whoever is driven or whoever is incited to anger and does not get angry is like a donkey. Meaning that you need to have some level of anger. Someone is punching you, beating you up, messing with your family, and you're just sitting there saying, no, we have to have patience, we have to have patience. It's the right amount of balance. That's why when we talk about anger is usually always talked about in a negative way. At all. But because anger usually causes people is usually out of balance, and that's where the problem lies. So understand that the goal is to not uproot these things, but to restore them to balance. And here are some of the proofs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the true believers in the Quran, and He says, it is those people who control their anger. وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. People who control their anger. It did not say those people who uproot their anger. So you don't have to remove it entirely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about charity in the Quran. He says, neither be tight-fisted, nor one who is so open-handed that they end up regretting what they've given. So don't be, even charity, you think charity is a great thing, but there's sometimes you can just not even hold on to anything. So being excessive on one side of charity, even that has to be balanced. Eating and drinking, that has to be balanced. Now the prophets, they used to do that. They would eat sweet food, they would eat nice things that have taste, but they would avoid gluttony. Gluttony meaning excessive eating too much. They would not do that. They used to marry, but they would remain chaste. Meaning that they would enjoy the opposite gender, they would have relations, spousal relations and everything, but they would never commit adultery or fornication or any of these things. They would sleep as well, because their body needed rest, but they would still pray throughout the night. So they had a correct balance. So whenever the balance is not there, either one side or the other, that's the real problem. So when we talk about diseases of the heart in this class, we're going to be talking about those which generally people end up going to the extreme in. And it usually does not work the opposite way. So how does it work? The method to restore balance. How do you restore balance to these characteristics? We talked about that. The way to bring it back is to exaggerate in condemning certain characteristics with the opposite. So how does that work? So for example, if you have a problem of stinginess, You're shahih, meaning you're bakhil. You don't spend when you need to spend. How do you combat it? It's the same way like the human body, right? If you had some problem in your body that's something's going on, you're too hot, right, outside. What do? You turn on air conditioner or something. You adjust the temperature back down. If you're too cold, what do? You turn on the heater or something and you bring it back up to normal. So the same thing, if you have a problem with being stingy, you have to balance it with generosity, but you don't balance it. So imagine this is the spectrum. This is an extreme, and this is the balance where you want to go. So you are here somewhere along the extreme. What do? He says specifically, you exaggerate in the opposite characteristic. So you don't aim for here. You aim here so that you get pulled slowly, and then as soon as you get towards the middle, even though you're doing this, you stop when you get in the middle. Why? Because if you aim here, if you aim in the middle, usually it's going to be harder for you to pull. But if you aim towards the opposite side, you're more likely to pull towards the middle. So for example, generosity, right? What do you start doing? You start spending more. If you have a problem with stinginess, you start spending more and giving more in charity than you would normally give in order to rebalance that characteristic back. If you have a problem with humility, you have a problem with arrogance, and you need to bring humility back in yourself, what do? You make sure that you do things which bring your humility back and keep you away from arrogance. For example, don't listen to yourself ever being praised. We're going to talk about this in a whole session about these things you can do. Just one example is, don't listen to yourself being praised. Now, is it wrong for you to hear yourself being praised? You're not praising yourself. Someone else is saying it. But this is one of those things where you need to exaggerate in the other side in order to bring yourself back into balance, because this can lead to arrogance. Or another thing, go and do something which people of your status or you would think that you shouldn't normally be doing. It's not your job to go and clean the mold from the side of the masjid or something like that. But you go and you get your old toothbrush and you sit there and you do it. Somebody sees you, so what are you doing? You're the Khalifa, or let's say the Muslims or whatever it may be. What are you doing over here? You're pulling yourself back by exaggerating. So when you see somebody or you think yourself says, you know what, I don't want to go to the opposite extreme, that's the exact wrong thinking. You don't want to go too crazy. You don't want to stop sleeping or do something crazy, but meaning you have to exaggerate a little bit more in pulling yourself on the opposite direction. That's the way it works. Okay? So this is the way to acquire balance in these attributes. Now, acquiring balance will eventually become a habit. And once you do that and you apply this formula, it becomes a habit and your character changes, and now it's going to come naturally for you. Sometimes this is either a gift from Allah or it requires self-discipline. Some people can do it easier, some people it takes a longer and more difficult time. So we talked about how to achieve that. Remember, do not expect immediate results. It's going to take time. So when your heart starts enjoying that thing in the correct balance, that's when you're going to stop feeling the pain. So you need to be patient and you need to take the bitter medicine. It's going to feel bad. Giving money in charity in order to balance out your stinginess is going to feel bad. Fasting, because you have a tendency towards gluttony and eating too much, is going to feel bad in the beginning. Going and doing things which humble yourself, which you think are below you as your status, is going to feel bad. It's bitter medicine that you're taking. But you have to have patience over that. And once you're balanced, then you're not going to feel that pain anymore. It's like when you exercise. In the beginning, you start exercising, you get sore. And you start exercising and you're still sore and it's pain and all of that going on. Once you get into the habit and the routine, your body gets adjusted, you don't feel that anymore. Then you need to stay in that balance. If you're not doing it, then you start feeling bad. So this is exactly what's going to happen with your character. The same thing with reading, same thing with cleaning. Some people, they don't like to read. Reading is painful for them. Right? Like for example, I'll give you an example. When I grew up, reading was very difficult for me. I did not enjoy reading at all. In fact, I'll admit to you, all the novels, all those books you're supposed to read in high school, all those Tom Sawyer books and everything, I did not read a single one of them completely. Unfortunately, I still had a very good GPA and everything, but problem with our school system, right? But either way, it was very difficult. I didn't enjoy reading. But then the thing is, you have to know you can change your character. When you realize the importance of reading, and you realize that what you can get from a book is more than what you can get from a lecture in terms of amount of content, or certain things you can get from a book which you cannot get from a lecture, or you cannot get from a movie, or you cannot get from something else, then after a while you start becoming accustomed to it, and then you start to enjoy it. The same thing with, what's that example? Cleaning. Right? There are people who hate cleaning their room. Most kids, teenagers and people in college, brothers' dorm, subhanAllah, I don't know what to do with them. But they don't like cleaning. They're very messy people, and their bed is always unmade, and all of these problems. But then after a while, when they realize the importance of cleanliness, and they realize the importance of having a clean desk and an organized desk and all of these things, then after a while it becomes part of their nature, and now they're feeling great. When the desk is nice and clean, they feel good. When it's not, it's going to be... So the characteristic has changed around. They enjoy cleaning. It feels good for them. They actually start feeling good about it. So when you change that character, you're going to start feeling good when you're actually giving in charity. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. But rather than, oh man, it's like, okay, here's a little bit of money. It's going to feel great when you give it. So you can change your character, and you know that it's changed once you start feeling good about the correct balance when you're actually achieved it. Okay? So remember that it takes time, no immediate results. You have to be consistent. As the Prophet ﷺ said, he said that the most beloved actions to Allah are those which are done consistently, even if they be few, even if they be a small number of good actions. So I think we will stop here, and we'll take a 10-minute break, inshallah, and we'll come back and we'll continue about the way to rectify character, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. 10 minutes, so it's 12 till 12:10, inshallah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So, the way to rectify character. Understand that your character is like the body. So what do you do with the body? First of all, the body needs nourishment and it needs exercise. Right? So the same thing, your character needs to be nourished on a regular basis. So what is that nourishment? That nourishment is being in good company. That nourishment is getting, your spiritual reminders, getting your admonitions throughout the week or throughout the day. Reading Quran, praying, all of these things, these is part of the nourishment for your spiritual self. And exercise, right? So your body needs exercise, your spirit or your character also needs exercise. You need to manifest it. If you don't manifest certain qualities for a very long time, if you don't manifest generosity, if you don't manifest, what other good qualities? If you don't manifest, thanking people, if you don't manifest these qualities for a long time, then you stop exercising them, and then it's more difficult. So, for example, if you become accustomed to not thanking people for a very long time, then it's going to be more difficult for you to do that. The same way as if your body does not move for a very long time, it's very difficult to move it, because you need to get back into the habit. If your body is healthy, what do? You try to maintain its health, right? And if it's sick, then you try to treat it. You do the same thing with your character. If there is a problem in your body, what do? You counter it with the opposite. So for example, if someone is suffering from insomnia, what do they need? They need sleep. If somebody is ignorant, what do they need? They need the opposite. They need knowledge. If somebody is stingy, what are they in need of? They're in need of manifesting generosity. So you counter it with the opposite. The same way that you would do with your normal body. If you're cold, you need heat. If you're hot, you need cold. There's a treatment. The treatment for every single illness is different. So again, there's no magic pill. This is a big problem that people face, is that they think that there's just one general treatment.
So for example, you have a problem of arrogance. What do you do? What's your problem? How do you solve arrogance? Say, follow the way of the Prophet. Okay, fine. What is the way of the Prophet? What do I follow? You follow the Sunnah. So what is one aspect of the Sunnah? Brushing your teeth with a stick, with a toothstick. So you keep on brushing your teeth, you keep on brushing your teeth. Is that going to solve your problem of arrogance? No, because it's not the medicine for that specific thing. As one scholar mentioned it in a very eloquent way, he said the Sunnah or the way of the Prophet and the Quran, they're like medicine cabinets. It's like a medicine cabinet which has different medicines there. If you choose the wrong medicine, it's not going to help you solve that problem that you have. You have to choose the right medicine in order for it to solve your problem. So remember that the treatment for every illness is going to be different. And lastly, when you're dealing with your own body, if the doctor prescribes you bitter medicine, the medicine tastes bad, or if it's painful, or if you have to go to the dentist to get your tooth drilled because there's a cavity there, you have to endure some of that pain because it's for your own good. The same thing with the medicines that you're going to be dealing with in these diseases of the heart. You have to endure that pain and you have to have patience over those things. So there's going to be hunger involved. It's going to hurt. There's going to be humiliation. Sometimes you feel like you're being humiliated in the sense that you're trying to put yourself down and not be arrogant. It's going to hurt. Less money remaining in your bank account because you were giving it in charity. Every time you look at your bank account and it's going down, it's not going up as much as you would like it to go. It's going to feel bitter. It's going to hurt. But that's part of what you need. So have a firm resolve. Have a firm resolve that you want to change. And one of the things you can do is, first of all, many people fail because of their lack of commitment. If you look at diets in America, for example, most people fail when they go on a diet. Part of the reason is because they have a lack of serious, dedicated commitment to what they're doing. That's why it fails. The same thing, this is going to fail if you are not fully dedicated. If you're hesitant about changing yourself, you're not going to be able to change yourself. If you're serious and you're really dedicated to it, then you need to be patient in those phases and in those periods of difficulty when you start losing some of your motivation. This is where people are going to fail. People, either they're not serious in the beginning about changing, or they're serious, but what ends up happening is they're going to undergo some phases or some periods where their motivation is down. And that's where they're going to stop and they're going to fail. That's why Imam Ghazali, again, he specifically says, you have to learn to be patient during those times. So during those times, what do you need? The whole time you're manifesting the characteristic of generosity. Or you're manifesting the characteristic and you're putting all your effort in humbling yourself. Humility. There's going to be a time where you run out of energy. You run out of motivation. You're listening to a lecture and it's not motivating you. You're going to somebody else, you're going to a class, you're not being motivated at that time. The people who stop doing things because they stop motivation for a little while are the ones who fail. The whole point is, now you've been focusing on humility. You've been focusing on charity. The moment you lose that motivation, now your emphasis changes and you start focusing on patience. I'm going to keep this up. Even though I'm not motivated right now. I've lost my motivation. I've lost my drive. I've lost my dedication. Now my 100% focus needs to be patient and just keep it up. Keep up the minimum amount that I need to sustain this so that once I get ready again to keep on going, you never stop. So you never stop so that you don't have to start again. You just kind of bring it down and you maintain whatever you have gained. And you keep it there, and then when you're ready, you start working up again. So this is something you need to have. You help prevent yourself from getting used to these slumps. Right? Help yourself from not getting messed up by these things by doing one of two things. Either by rewarding yourself by doing when you do something good, or by punishing yourself when you're not keeping up with something. So for example, if you catch yourself backbiting somebody, speaking bad about somebody behind their back, and we're going to talk about the harms of the tongue. If you find yourself doing that, you set up a punishment for yourself. I'm going to fast this month. I'm going to fast that week, Monday and Thursday, when I catch myself backbiting somebody else. If I catch myself lying, That month, I'm going to fast the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th of that day as a punishment. It's a good punishment. It's not like you're physically torturing yourself. It's a good punishment, but you're doing that in order to make yourself do something. If I catch myself looking at something I shouldn't be looking at, or saying something else I shouldn't be saying, I'm going to donate X amount of money to this charitable cause. It's a punishment for you, but it's designed to kind of make a change in you. So do that. And that's one of the ways you can actually keep your firm resolve going and keep yourself going on this. How do you know what good character is? Okay? There's a trap. The trap about purification of the heart and the trap about knowing what good character is, when you put in a little bit effort and you see some good, results, you start assuming that the process is over. Alhamdulillah, I've changed. And now I've cleaned myself and everything is good, and then you stop. That's a trap, and don't fall for that trap. So the thing we have to understand is that today, immorality is being marketed to us. It's being sold to us everywhere we go. There are these diseases that we're told that we should be arrogant, and that we should show off, and that we should speak in a certain way which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we should eat this amount of food that is actually going to harm us. We're being bombarded with all of these things. So what do? First thing is that if you think that your heart is pure, then most likely you're suffering from one of two diseases. Either arrogance or ignorance or delusion. Ignorance and delusion kind of go into the same thing. So you're suffering from one of these two things. They're most likely dominant. So what do? Read the Quran and start asking yourself these questions to bring yourself back. Ask yourself the questions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the true believers as these group of people. Ask yourself, do I concentrate in my prayer? Allah described the believers as people who are concentrating and are humble in their prayer. Do I avoid vain talk? Do I lower my gaze? Do I fulfill my commitments that I make? Do I guard my prayers and pray all of them on time? Does my heart tremble when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned? Think about that. Does my faith increase when the verses of Allah are recited? It says that the true believers are those who this happens to them. Am I humble? Do I avoid arguing with ignorant people? Or do I end up arguing with them? Do I really give in charity what I'm able to? And all the other things. While you're reading the Quran, whenever you come across some description, say, you know what? Am I doing, do I have this characteristic that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to have and He's mentioning in the Quran? He's not just saying that the true believers are this, and you say, oh, that's nice because the true believer. It's about you. So do you have these characteristics? Then you read hadith. And whenever you read a hadith, you think, do I really love for my brother what I love for myself? Like there's a hadith about that. Do I really do that? Do I remain quiet when I have nothing good to say? The Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, either say whoever believes in Allah in the last day, let him say something good or be quiet. Do I do that or I don't do that? So whenever you go through all of these things, ask yourself, do I fall into that category? And if you don't, then you say, okay, well, then there's a problem. But remember that how do you know what is good character? What ends up happening is people who have had diseases in their heart for such a long time, they've lost the ability to even recognize what is good and what is bad. So that is going to be defined by what Islam teaches. That's going to be defined by the Quran. It's going to be defined by the Sunnah, the way of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Because again, we're marketed with these things. We're taught even in school that, in politics, you read The Prince, right? Machiavelli. How many of you read The Prince in school or read it at all? Few, right? Taught to be deceptive. This is the way it needs to be done. Taught to take advantage of other people. This is the way it should be done. These are things which are being pushed upon us. And we're taught that they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. We need to readjust ourselves. So you readjust yourself and you know what's good character, what's bad character, what is right and wrong by knowing more about Islam and by studying about Islam. So we'll conclude with this section on how to know your own faults. It's a very, very important section. Most people do not know their own faults. They do not know the problems that they have in themselves. And it's said, there's a statement, an old saying, that says that you can see the splinter in somebody else, but you cannot see the log in your own eyes. What it means, basically, in modern terminology, is that you can detect a tiny spot on somebody else's clothing. Imagine you see somebody's clothing. You see a little tiny spot on there. Let's say they have a white shirt or something. Oh, look, this person messed up. There's a white spot there. And you might have a huge stain on your own shirt, but you're not looking at it. You're not focusing on yourself at all. You're just focusing on somebody else. This is a problem. Another example would be, this is another one from Imam al-Ghazali. He says, imagine you're going and you're shooing off the flies off somebody else. There's flies come, imagine there's some fly coming and it's going on somebody else and you're shooing the flies off of them. I'm keeping the flies away from you. And he said at the same time, there's a scorpion crawling up your body. There's a poisonous insect on your body and you're sitting there worrying about the flies. Other person, we need to make sure that this person is taken care of. It's not going to work. Right? This is ridiculous. You wouldn't do something like that. So being able to see your faults is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And most people cannot see them. Because the only way to correct them is if you can see them. So the diseases of the heart remain hidden. So you need to test yourself regularly. You need to test yourself. So think about, somebody insults you. These are many tests you can make tests for yourself. Somebody were to insult you. How do you respond? What is your reaction? What do you feel if somebody were to insult you? You start insulting them back? You start getting upset? You start defending yourself? How do you respond? Think about that. What type of anger motivates you or whatever? Somebody asks you to give in charity for some cause that you believe in and you're convinced it's a good cause. What do you feel? What's your first feeling that you get? Another charitable organization, or oh, my money, or my wealth, or it's going down, it's not going to feel good. Test yourself and you will learn a lot about yourself by applying these tests to yourself. The closer you get to Allah, the more you begin to criticize yourself. This is a sign of righteousness. Is that you criticize yourself and you look at yourself more in the mirror, meaning that you look at your own faults. Now, most people, if you can't tell your faults by yourself, even if you're trying to see them, you're not seeing them, there's 4 other methods to figure out what are the problems that you have. So these 4 methods, number one is to consult an expert. Someone who's a specialist in this field, someone who's very pious, someone who knows about how these things work, and you sit with them, you study with them, and they can tell you these things. Now these type of people, they're very rare. They're very, very rare if they exist. And scholars actually differ whether they exist or they don't exist in reality. In fact, there was a scholar by the name of Ahmad Zarruq, a very great scholar. He wrote a book called Hidayatu Rabbi 'inda Faqd al-Murabbi. He said the book is called The Guidance of My Lord when there is no murabbi, meaning there is no spiritual guide. There is no mentor. See, people are always looking for a mentor. So he wrote a book and he said, in his opinion, there were no mentors left in his time. And this was like a long time ago. Imagine our time. Big problem. So it doesn't mean that, okay, well, there's no mentors left and I don't have a mentor, therefore I cannot fix anything. No. This is only one way. If you can find somebody that you trust, that's reliable, that you know is knowledgeable in this, benefit from them. Benefit from them. Number 2. An insightful friend. So have a friend, this slide needs to be adjusted. An insightful and knowledgeable friend. Both of them have to exist in that friend. So you have that friend of yours watch over you. Okay? And you let them, you know that, I'm open. I want you to tell me that I have some problem. You see some defect in me, you see some problem in me, you let me know. But they have to be insightful and they have to be knowledgeable. Because if they're simply insightful but they're not knowledgeable, they're going to point out wrong things in you. And then you're going to say, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. So they have to be both insightful and knowledgeable friend to watch over you and inform you about your faults. And this will help you. Because they're your friend, you're more likely to accept it from them. But you have to be willing to accept it from them as well. This is something that people used to practice. So for example, Umar radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, the second Khalifa, he used to say, may Allah have mercy on a person who gifts me my own faults. Think about that statement. May Allah, he's making dua, he's making a supplication for these people. Whoever gifts me my own faults. For him, being told about your own faults was a gift from Allah because he couldn't detect it on his own. And he used to actually do that. He went to Salman al-Farisi and he asked him, when he was Khalifa, he asked Salman al-Farisi, he says, tell me something bad that you've heard about me. So Salman says, just excuse me, I don't want to answer this question. Because if you answer the question and you don't know what's going to happen. Umar was known to have also a little bit of anger. He had a little bit of a temper. He was a tough man. He could control it, but he was a tough man. You don't want to make him upset. So he says, please just don't ask me this question. He insisted, I want you to tell me what you've heard about me or what you've seen about me. Tell me the problem that I have. Tell me straightforward. So Salman said, I've heard that you have 2 different kinds of dishes that are served to you at one time. Just think about that. This was considered to be a defect at that time. Imagine how many dishes we have. You go to the buffet, it's like 30 dishes, you select whatever one you want. He's the Khalifa, by the way. He's the Khalifa. He's in charge of the entire Muslim empire. And he says, and Salman is telling him straightforward, I heard that you got 2 different dishes on the table at the same time. This is one thing I heard about you. And then he says, and I heard that you have 2 different outfits. One you wear in the daytime and one you wear in the nighttime. You have 2 different pairs of clothes that you're wearing. This is what I've heard about you. Umar asked him, anything else? Is there anything else you've heard about me? He said, no. This is the only thing that has reached me, that there's a problem in you. So Umar responded, he said, as for these things, I actually have an excuse. He didn't need to explain himself. He didn't need to say, this is the reason why there's one dish and there's a second dish. He said, I have an excuse for these 2 things. So, alhamdulillah, I'm fine. He's not interested in defending himself. What did he want to know? He wanted to know the problem. He says, you know what? Alhamdulillah, that's not a problem. Because I have he had some reason why he would wear a different garment. And he had some reason why there's 2 dishes. Maybe there was no choice. Maybe someone kept on giving him a gift as 2 dishes. No, you don't know. And he didn't tell us. And he didn't care to tell us. Because he was only interested in knowing the problem himself. And he said, alhamdulillah, this is not a problem. Anything else? No, nothing else. But he used to ask, and asking is the important thing. Umar used to ask Huzaifa ibn al-Yaman, one of the companions who was told the secret of the Prophet ﷺ. Where is it? It's not here. He was told the secret of the Prophet ﷺ about who the hypocrites in Medina are. He was told, and Umar used to go and consult Huzaifa, and he used to ask him that, this guy, before appointing him as a governor, before making him a special position in the Islamic empire, said, is he one of the hypocrites that was told? Because we never know. He could be one of the hypocrites. Maybe we see something good in him, but he actually has a disease of hypocrisy. So he used to go and ask Huzaifa before he would appoint somebody. But he went to Huzaifa himself and he asked him, he said, you know the secrets of the Messenger of Allah, meaning who is a hypocrite and who is not. So he asked him, he says, am I a hypocrite? Am I one of them? Meaning, I'm not only asking, am I on the list of hypocrites? He's asking, am I on the list of hypocrites? Umar is asking this question. And then he's asking not only that, but he's implying, those people you see on the list, do you see any characteristics in them that I happen to have as well? That's what he's asking for. And his name was not on the list, and he says, no, you're not one of them, and you're not like them at all. What I know about them, Huzaifa was an expert in these people. He knew their characteristics. He was the only person who was told. The Prophet ﷺ did not tell anybody else about who the hypocrites were in Medina. He kept it a secret for reasons, which we've discussed in another class. But the fact that Umar is going and asking him, am I one of them? Or do I have any of these traits? That's huge. That's huge. Most people, they're not going to ask. Why would I ask? I'm not one of them. What they would do instead is, when they hear about the list, say, you know what, I bet you that guy's on the list. And I know quite a few people who would be on the list, and they start mentioning their names, and that guy, and that guy. Umar didn't care about that. Just cares about himself, and that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on ourselves. The next thing is to realize that it's very rare to find those friends who will be straightforward with you without you actually asking them or something. Why? Because most friends will either flatter you and praise you and say, no, you're such a great person and you're so this and you're so that. They don't want to point out faults in you. Or they're just going to remain quiet out of fear of making you upset, and then you say, oh, our friendship is going to be in jeopardy. So if that's the case, if you can find that friend, great. Go and ask them and be honest. And don't just make it shallow. Don't just walk up to the random person and say, I want you to do this for me. And then actually when they point out something to you, and you say, man, I thought we were friends, man. This is what you think about me. This is not right. This is not going to help at all. So don't make it a shallow thing. Think very carefully before you even go and approach somebody about this. But if most of your friends cannot do this for you, then what do? You can learn from your enemies. You can actually learn from your enemies the problems that you have. Because your enemies might insult you. They may insult you, and the thing is, when they insult you, they're really trying to focus on the worst characteristics that you have. Because they're trying to mess you up, because they don't like you. But the thing is, you can actually utilize that in order to find out a problem in yourself. Sometimes they may be lying, sometimes they may be correct. So it's like, for example, there's a military strategist. Right? Let's imagine you're a military strategist. Somebody comes and an army comes and attacks a city. What did they just do now? You can actually learn from your enemy because they just reveal the weaknesses that you have in your city. So now you can learn from that. So you learn from your enemies what they're saying. And it just might be that a clever enemy who is really attacking you properly might be more useful than a friend who remains silent and doesn't tell you about your own faults. So you can benefit from them. And number 4, observe people and learn from their mistakes. Not observe people and criticize them or think how bad they are. Observe people and learn from their mistakes and then think, do I have that problem in myself? You see somebody saying something like that and you say, you know what? Do I do that sometimes? Do I have this problem in myself sometimes? So the same thing, this happens regularly. If you see a spot on a person's shirt, what do? You start checking yourself. This happens to a lot of guys, right? Especially guys who end up using urinals a lot. I'm telling this to the guys because when they end up using urinals, a lot of them, they forget to zip up when they go at work. It happens. So what happens when they see a guy and the guy's zipper is open? What's the first thing that many people do? They look at their own zipper, right? Because that's really embarrassing. I need to make 100% sure I'm not having the same problem. Same thing is that when you see a defect in somebody else, double check yourself and make sure that you don't have the same defect, inshallah ta'ala. So we alhamdulillah, we finished here. We covered these things. So we'll take questions, and if the questions are done and we still have time, we'll just start with the next section. The next section is the dangers of the tongue. So any questions, inshallah? Okay, so we're going to go into details. Every disease, there's different ways of going in the opposite. But generally, like for example, charity was the example. Charity is one of the best examples. If you find yourself miserly, you don't like giving in charity. What do? You exaggerate in the opposite. Your funds, normally, let's say, you have such and such money in your bank account. You have such and such income. Normally, where you would want to be spending, you spend more than what you normally should be spending in charity in order to bring yourself back in the balance. That's what it means to exaggerate in the opposite. You go the opposite way a little bit more to get yourself used. Otherwise, if you just aim for the balance, you're going to be like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to give the minimum amount of money that I have to give that I've set for myself. But you're not reaching over there. The same thing with, let's say, with arrogance. You exaggerate in the opposite. You do something that is completely against arrogance. That not to humiliate yourself, really. You don't want to put yourself down either. But you do something that would break your arrogance, to make sure that you start thinking, who do I think I am? I'm too good to pick up a chair. I'm too good to pick up a table or something like. If that's part of your problem, you start doing that and you do more. You start cleaning it, for example, or you do something that you feel that normally you shouldn't, or you wouldn't be doing that because of your arrogance. You kind of break it by doing the opposite. That's what it means to exaggerate. A little bit. Not too crazy, but a little bit to the other side. No. The eventual goal is to not stay there. That's only for the period of fixing yourself. That's only for the period of the treatment. Once it's over, once you've attained balance, you stop that. It's for a temporary period to get yourself out of it. Yeah, someone who has schizophrenia or some medical disorder, if it's so serious where they're not going to be held responsible because they really don't have control over that, then they're not going to be held responsible for that. Same thing with children. So when children exhibit this kind of behavior, it's because they've not perfected their free will or their choice yet, because they've not attained maturity. So the thing is, when someone has an illness or something like that, the thing is you have to understand that in the sight of Allah, those people, if they do not have full control over themselves, they're not going to be held accountable. So that's that thing. How do we determine to what extent do they actually have it? We can never know with certainty. So we estimate, and that's why with medical science and all that, we estimate to what level are they in control of their, of themselves, of their behavior actually. So in reality, Allah is going to know to what extent in reality they were really in control. We estimate, and the reason why I'm specifying this is because sometimes the medical field, or psychologists, for example, they tend to be in extremes and exaggerated things. So, for example, many of them say that criminals should not actually be. There's actually a madhab, there's actually a school of thought. Says criminals should not be punished because when they're doing it, it's all because of the circumstances in which they were. It's not their actual choice. They were forced to do it. Now, that's a very extreme position to take that to its logical conclusion. But that's becoming more and more prevalent today. So it really, in reality, Allah is going to know, in reality, to what extent they're in control or not. But their responsibility as an individual is to try their best as much as they can to rectify it. And our job is to judge them when we need to judge them according to what appears to be most in line with their disease or the illness that they have. We cannot judge otherwise. And their effort, but you can't tell what their effort is. Because if you can't tell what the real control they have, you can't tell their effort. When I say judge them, I don't mean judge them in behavior. Meaning judge them if they do something wrong and you have to do something with regards to law. To what extent are they insane, or to what extent did they have control over themselves? You're going to have to judge according to the outward. But only Allah knows what the real inward really is. So for them as an individual, what the advice to them is they should work as much as they can on themselves. For us as observers or family and friends, we should try to encourage them to do as much as they can, and then that's all we can do. For people who are in a state of authority, or in the medical profession, psychologists or whatever, they need to look at them in the best of ways that they can judge them. So see, that's the misconception that I was trying to correct. Is that in reality, the heart, not the physical heart, but the heart or the nafs or the soul is in control of the mind. We have to understand that. So see, that's the point is that research is materialistic research, right? It's based upon what we can see and perceive and experiment with. So this is something that's beyond the physical, what's called metaphysical. It's beyond, right? So this is something that we're being taught from Allah, that there's another entity, there's something there that's in control of everything, that's in control of the mind. That's something that can never be tested. It's not going to be that you can't experiment with it, you can't detect it in a microscope or something. The only way we can know about it is through revelation, and that's why we know about it. So that's the thing that's telling us that that's actually the thing that's in control. So that's something that we have to understand. It's not just the mind. There's something that's causing the mind to make it. So the mind is just an instrument that's being used. Like, for example, the hand is an instrument that the mind is using, right, to control. The heart or the soul is using the mind to control this. It's one level of authority higher. It's like the king. Imam Ghazali said, it's the king of the thing, and the mind is like the governors and the other things that the king sends out to go do all the tasks. I'm using the terms heart and soul is the same. So I'm using them as the same. Yeah, there's different words. There's ruh, and there's nafs, and then there's qalb, and there's different words. Just for the sake of not going into all this theory, I'm using it as the same. So hopefully that clarifies. So the question is, how do you reconcile between pointing out the faults of other people and focusing on your own faults? You reconcile by separating out. What we're covering in this class is we only want to focus on the diseases of the heart for yourself, to purify it. When we cover other classes, like for example, we take hadith class, or we read something in the Quran or tafsir or whatever it is, that you should be enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. Or you should be correcting something when you see something that's wrong. We're going to put that in a separate category. And you follow that whenever it comes. But that's what, for this class, we just want to limit and focus on the diseases of the heart ourselves. So that should be done. It's not that it shouldn't be done. So how do you apply that? You apply that in the other teachings that are being taught. So for example, correcting a wrong or enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, that falls into that principle. Okay, so how do you keep the motivation up? The thing is, you need to feed the heart with knowledge, inspiration. You need to be in good company. You need to get, mau'izah, which means reminders, admonition. All of these things play a role. And you need to figure out which one seems to work best for you. So prayer is one. Asking Allah to keep your motivation up is one of the very, very important ways. Staying in good company is a very, very important way. And you have to realize that even the companions fluctuated. Even they fluctuated when they were away from the Prophet ﷺ, they used to feel sometimes bad. And then when they would go back in his company, then they would say, you know what, I feel so good in your company, outside of your company, I feel like I'm a hypocrite, my motivation is gone, I don't feel like doing anything. So it's the same thing. It's going to happen. How do you do it? You try all these techniques. Ask Allah first of all to keep your motivation up, to let you be patient through the difficulties. Stay in good company, to listen to lectures, to go and read Quran, to reflect upon the stories. All of these techniques, try all of them. We go to our local imams, how do we know they're trustworthy? In terms of this topic. Okay. You test them. You test them. You can devise your own test, and you can figure out, and you can see from their behavior, you can see from their character, whether or not they're reliable or they're not. Some are and some are not, and that's just the way it is. It should not depress you, should not bring you down. Your goal is to still do what you need to get done. So we'll conclude with this, and Adam has some announcements to make, inshallah. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.